The dust cloud rising from the hooves of Wyatt Schneider's mare disappeared into the horizon, as Teresa Coleman stood at the window of her father's general store in Skidoo, California, watching until there was nothing left to see but empty desert and dying light. She pressed her palm against the glass, feeling the lingering heat of the October sun, and wondered if he would ever know how much she loved him. It was 1883, and Wyatt had been working the cattle drives that passed through their small mining town nestled in the Panamint Range. He had come into the store 3 months prior, dusty and tired, looking for supplies before heading back out to the ranges where men spent weeks under stars that seemed close enough to touch. Teresa had been arranging tins of peaches when he walked in, his boots leaving prints on the swept floor, his hat shadowing eyes that were the color of creek water after rain. Their courtship had been brief but intense, stolen moments between his work and her responsibilities, helping her father run the store. They had walked along the canyon edges at sunset, sharing dreams about what life could be beyond the harsh desert landscape. He had kissed her once, just once, behind the abandoned stamp mill, and she had felt her entire world shift on its axis. Then he told her he had to leave. His brother back in Wyoming had taken ill, and family was family. He promised to return within 2 months, promised to write, promised her a future together. She had nodded, swallowing back tears, believing every word because she needed to believe. That night, after he rode away, Teresa sat at her small desk in the room above the store and began writing the first letter. She poured her heart onto the page, describing how empty the store felt without him walking through the door, how the sunset seemed dimmer without him standing beside her, how she counted each day like a miser counting coins. She addressed it carefully to Wyatt Schneider, care of general delivery, Laramie, Wyoming, exactly as he had instructed. The next morning she gave it to the stagecoach driver who promised to see it sent north. A week passed, then 2. Teresa wrote again, this time describing the way the autumn winds had started sweeping down from the mountains, bringing the first hints of winter cold. She wrote about the new family who had moved to town, the Hendersons, and how their youngest daughter reminded her of what she imagined their own children might look like someday, with his eyes and her dark hair. She gave this letter to the same driver, pressing an extra coin into his weathered palm to ensure its safe delivery. By the 3rd week, worry had begun to settle into her bones like the desert cold settled into the valleys at night. No response had come. She told herself that mail was slow, that Wyoming was far, that he was probably busy caring for his brother and would write as soon as he could. Still, she wrote another letter and another, her words growing more desperate with each page. Her father, Samuel Coleman, watched his daughter's increasing melancholy with concern creased into his weathered face. He said nothing at first, but when Teresa's smile stopped reaching her eyes, when she began standing at that window every evening watching the eastern road, he finally spoke. "Sweetheart, maybe it's time to accept that young Cowboy isn't coming back." "He promised, Papa," Teresa had replied, her voice steady despite the crack forming in her heart. "Wyatt keeps his promises." But the weeks became months and winter settled over Skidoo with unusual ferocity. Teresa continued writing, 1 letter each week, documenting her life, her thoughts, her unwavering love for a man who never responded. She wrote about the Christmas social at the church, about the prospector who struck a decent vein of gold up in the canyon, about the traveling preacher who came through town speaking of redemption and second chances. She wrote about her 21st birthday in January, spent quietly with her father and their housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, a widow who had become like an aunt to her. She wrote about the spring thaw and the wildflowers that carpeted the foothills in unexpected bursts of color. She wrote about hope and heartbreak in equal measure. By the time summer returned to the desert, bringing its relentless heat, Teresa had written 42 letters, 42 declarations of love, sent faithfully through the mail, disappearing into the vast distance between California and Wyoming like prayers whispered into a void. In July, a letter finally arrived bearing a Wyoming postmark. Teresa's hands shook as she tore it open, standing right there in the store while her father watched with concerned eyes. The handwriting was unfamiliar, feminine, and careful. It was from a woman named Wyatt Schneider, Wyatt's sister-in-law. The words blurred as Teresa read them once, then twice, trying to make them mean something different than what they said. Wyatt's brother had died. Wyatt had stayed to help Catherine and her 3 children keep the ranch running. And then, just 2 months ago, Wyatt himself had been thrown from a horse while breaking a particularly wild Mustang. He had struck his head on a rock and never woken up. He was buried next to his brother in the family plot on the ranch. Catherine had found Teresa's name and the store's address among Wyatt's possessions and thought she should know. She made no mention of any letters. Teresa's knees gave out, and she sank onto the stool behind the counter, the letter falling from her fingers. Her father rushed to her side, reading the fallen page, and then gathered his daughter into his arms while she shattered into pieces. For weeks, Teresa moved through her days like a ghost, performing her duties with mechanical precision while feeling absolutely nothing. The letter she had written seemed like a cruel joke now, love poured out for a man who had died without ever knowing the depth of her devotion. Then one morning, Mrs. Patterson found Teresa at her desk, pen in hand, writing another letter. "Child, what are you doing?" the older woman asked gently. Teresa looked up, her eyes dry but hollow. "I need to finish telling him everything. Even if he never read the others, even if he is gone, I need to finish." Mrs. Patterson had the wisdom to say nothing, simply touching Teresa's shoulder before leaving her to her grief. Teresa wrote 5 more letters over the following weeks, a final goodbye stretched across pages and pages. She told Wyatt about learning of his death, about the hole it had carved into her chest, about how she would carry her love for him until her own final breath. She told him she forgave him for not writing, that she understood he must have been overwhelmed with responsibility and grief, that she only wished she could have been there to ease his burdens. She addressed these final letters the same as all the others, and gave them to the stage coach driver, even knowing they would never reach their intended recipient. It was a ritual of closure, a way of letting go. Then Teresa sealed away her grief, tucked it into the smallest chamber of her heart and determined to move forward. Her father needed her. The store needed her. Life, with all its harsh indifference, continued whether she wished it to or not. Years passed with the slow inevitability of seasons. Teresa turned 23, then 25. The miners came and went, following rumors of strikes and veins that played out too quickly. Skidoo itself experienced a brief boom when the newspaper declared it the next big thing, then watched the population swell and shrink like breathing. Teresa remained, steady and constant, running the store with quiet efficiency. She was kind to the customers, fair in her dealings, and impervious to the attentions of the various men who tried to court her. She wore Wyatt's memory like armor, protecting herself from the possibility of ever hurting that deeply again. Her father passed in 1888, a sudden fever that took him in less than a week. Teresa buried him in the small cemetery on the edge of town and inherited the store, becoming one of the few independent businesswomen in the territory. She hired a young man named Jacob to help with the heavy work and continued on, Alone but not entirely lonely. She had Mrs. Patterson, who refused to retire and insisted on keeping house for Teresa in the rooms above the store. She had her regular customers who had become something like friends. She had the strange, stark beauty of the desert landscape, the mountains that changed color with the light, the stars that still seemed close enough to touch on clear nights. And she had her memories of 3 perfect months when she had loved and been loved, even if that love had been cut short by fate's cruel hand. It was 1891, 8 years after Wyatt had ridden away, when everything changed again. Teresa was inventorying stock in the back room on a Tuesday afternoon when she heard the bell above the door chime. She called out that she would be right there, and finished counting the sacks of flour before emerging, wiping dust from her hands on her apron. A man stood at the counter, his back to her, tall and broad-shouldered in the way of someone who made his living through physical labor. His hat hung from his hand, revealing dark hair shot through with premature silver at the temples. "How can I help you?" Teresa asked, moving behind the counter with her practiced shopkeeper's smile. The man turned, and Teresa's world stopped spinning. It was impossible. It was insane. It was Wyatt Schneider, older and weathered but unmistakably alive, staring at her with eyes that held recognition and wonder and something that looked like fear. "Teresa," he said, and his voice was exactly as she remembered, rough and warm like sun-heated stone. The room tilted. Teresa gripped the counter's edge, her knuckles white, her breath coming in short gasps. "No, you are dead. You died 8 years ago. I got the letter. You fell from a horse and you died." Wyatt took a step forward, then stopped when Teresa flinched back. "I almost died. I was in a coma for 3 weeks. When I woke up, it took months to recover fully. But I am alive, Teresa. I am standing right here." "Then where have you been?" The words came out as a whisper, then a shout. "Where have you been for 8 years? Why did you never write? Why did you let me think you were dead?" "I wrote," Wyatt said, his face contorted with confusion and pain. "I wrote every week for months. I poured my heart into those letters, Teresa. When you never responded, when no letters came back, I thought you had moved on, that you had decided you did not want a life with a simple cowhand after all." Teresa shook her head violently. "That is a lie. I never received a single letter, not one. I wrote to you every week, 47 letters in all, and you never responded. Your sister-in-law wrote to tell me you had died. Catherine wrote to you." Wyatt's expression shifted to bewilderment. "She never told me, and I never got any letters from you. I swear it on my life." They stared at each other across the counter, 8 years of pain and misunderstanding hanging between them like smoke. Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway from the back, took one look at the scene, and quietly disappeared again. "Why are you here now?" Teresa finally asked, her voice breaking. "After all this time, why now?" Wyatt reached into his coat and pulled out a bundle of papers, tied with a faded ribbon. Teresa recognized them instantly, her own handwriting covering the pages, and her knees nearly gave out again. "I found these 3 days ago," Wyatt said softly. "In a trunk in Catherine's attic. I was helping her prepare to move to town to live with her daughter. We found this trunk that had belonged to my brother, and inside were all these letters, addressed to me but never delivered. Catherine broke down when she saw them. She confessed everything." Teresa's hands trembled as she reached for the bundle, but she could not quite bring herself to touch it. "I do not understand." "My brother's wife loved me," Wyatt said, and the words seemed to pain him. "Not in a proper way. She thought if she kept your letters from reaching me, if she intercepted my letters to you and destroyed them, I would eventually turn to her after my brother died. She sent you that letter saying I had died, hoping you would stop writing, stop waiting." When I recovered and kept writing to you, she kept destroying those letters too. When no responses came from you, she told me you had likely married someone else, that I should accept it and move on. That is monstrous, Teresa breathed. Yes, Wyatt agreed. When she finally confessed, when I read your letters and understood what had been stolen from us, I left immediately. I rode straight through, changing horses at every station, barely stopping to sleep. I had to get here. I had to know if there was any chance, any possibility that you might still feel something for me, that we might salvage what was taken from us. Teresa looked at this man, this ghost made flesh, and felt 8 years of carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. But beneath the ruins was not just love but also anger, grief, and a bone-deep wariness of being hurt again. I mourned you, she said, her voice shaking. I grieved as truly as if you had died. I built a life around the fact that you were gone. You cannot just walk back in here and expect everything to be as it was. I know, Wyatt said, and she could see tears gathering in his eyes. I know I cannot. But Teresa, I have loved you every single day for 8 years. Even thinking you had forgotten me, even believing you had married another, I could not stop loving you. Reading your letters, understanding that you loved me too, that you never stopped, it is the only thing that has kept me breathing these past 3 days. He set the bundle of letters on the counter between them. These belong to you. Your words, your heart. I read them and I hope you can forgive that invasion, but I needed to understand what happened. And now I am here, and I am begging you to give me a chance. Not to pick up where we left off, because too much time has passed for that, but to start again. To court you properly. To prove that I am worth the risk of letting me into your heart again. Teresa stared at the letters, at the evidence of her younger self's devotion, and felt something crack open inside her chest. It was not the same heart that had loved him 8 years ago. It was harder now, more scarred, but it was still capable of feeling. That terrified her more than anything. I need time, she said finally. I need time to think, to process all of this. It is too much, too fast. Wyatt nodded, not trying to hide his disappointment but accepting her boundary. I am staying at the boarding house on the north end of town. Take all the time you need. I will be here, waiting for as long as it takes. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it is worth, Teresa, I am sorry. I am so desperately sorry for all the pain that was caused, even though I know it was not directly my fault. You deserved better than what happened. Then he was gone, and Teresa was alone with her letters and her shattered composure. Mrs. Patterson emerged immediately, gathering Teresa into a fierce embrace. Lord have mercy, child. That man is supposed to be dead. I know, Teresa said, and then she started laughing, great gasping laughs that turned into sobs, releasing 8 years of pent-up emotion in a flood that left her exhausted and hollow. That night, Teresa sat at her desk and untied the ribbon around her letters. She read them, every single one, watching her younger self pour out love and hope and eventually grief onto the pages. The experience was excruciating and cathartic in equal measure. The next morning, she was grimly determined to continue as normal, to not let Wyatt's sudden reappearance derail her carefully ordered life. But Skidoo was a small town, and news traveled faster than wildfire. By noon, everyone knew that the cowboy Teresa had mourned for 8 years was alive and staying at Mrs. Brennan's boarding house. The looks of pity and curiosity from her customers made Teresa want to scream. Instead, she smiled blandly and refused to discuss the matter, even when Mrs. Hendricks tried to pry details from her under the guise of concern. 3 days passed. Teresa caught glimpses of Wyatt around town, always at a distance, respecting her request for space. He had taken work at the livery stable, she heard, mucking stalls and tending horses. Honest work for an honest wage. On the fourth day he came into the store just before closing. Teresa's heart lurched at the sight of him, and she hated herself for the reaction. "I am not trying to pressure you," Wyatt said quietly. "I just need a few supplies." Teresa nodded stiffly and helped him gather what he needed: salt pork and coffee, tobacco and matches. Their fingers brushed when she handed him his change, and the jolt of contact made them both freeze. "Teresa," Wyatt said, his voice rough, "may I ask you something?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "In your letters, you wrote about the sunset the day I left, about how it seemed dimmer without me there. Do you remember that?" "I remember everything I wrote," Teresa said. "Would you watch the sunset with me tonight? Just that, nothing more." "I have missed 8 years of sunsets with you, and I cannot get those back, but maybe I could have just one." Teresa knew she should say no. She should protect herself, maintain distance, not let him back into her life so easily. But she looked into his eyes and saw the same pain she felt reflected back at her, and she found herself nodding. They walked to the canyon edge in silence, the same spot where they had stood 8 years before. The sky put on a spectacular show, painting itself in shades of orange and purple and gold. The desert spread out before them, harsh and beautiful and infinite. "I wrote you letters too," Wyatt said softly, not looking at her. "Dozens of them. I told you about my brother's death, about helping Catherine with the ranch, about the accident and my recovery. I told you about the nightmares I had while in the coma, dreams where I was trying to reach you but could never quite get there. I told you that loving you was the only thing that made sense in a world that had become unbearably cruel." Teresa felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I told you about my father's death, about taking over the store, about the loneliness that felt like drowning. I told you that I would wait forever if I had to, that my heart was yours whether you claimed it or not." "We lost so much time," Wyatt said, and his voice broke on the words. "We did," Teresa agreed. "And I do not know how to forgive that, even though it was not your fault. Even though it was not my fault. We were victims of someone else's cruelty, and I am so angry about it I can barely breathe sometimes." Wyatt turned to face her then, and she saw tears on his face too. "Then be angry. Rage at the unfairness of it. I will stand here and rage with you, and maybe together we can work through it." Something in Teresa's chest loosened, just a fraction. "I am not the same person I was at 20. That girl who wrote those letters, she was softer, more trusting. I have had to become harder to survive." "I am not the same either," Wyatt said. "I have scars now, inside and out. I have seen too much death, carried too much grief. But Teresa, the one thing that has not changed is how I feel about you. That is the constant that has gotten me through everything else." The sun dipped below the horizon, and the desert began to cool. Teresa wrapped her arms around herself, and before she could protest, Wyatt had shrugged out of his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It smelled like leather and sage and something uniquely him, and the familiarity of it made her want to weep. "I need to tell you something," she said, making a decision. "If we are going to try this, to see if we can build something from the ruins of what we lost, you need to understand. I am terrified. I am so scared of letting myself love you again, of being that vulnerable, of risking the kind of pain I felt when I thought you were dead." "I understand," Wyatt said, "and I am terrified too. Terrified that I am too late, that the damage is too deep, that you will decide I am not worth the risk." "So what do we do?" Teresa asked, searching his face in the fading light. "We take it slow," Wyatt said. "We get to know each other again as we are now, not as we were. We build something new instead of trying to resurrect the past. And we are honest, completely honest, about what we are feeling every step of the way." Teresa considered this, then slowly nodded. I can try that. I cannot promise it will work, cannot promise my heart will cooperate, but I can try. Wyatt's smile was like sunrise, hope breaking through darkness. That is all I ask. They walked back to town in the gathering dusk, not touching but somehow together. When they reached the store, Wyatt bid her good night with old-fashioned courtesy, tipping his hat and stepping back. Teresa watched him walk away, and let herself feel the small flutter of possibility in her chest. Over the following weeks, Wyatt courted Teresa with patient determination. He came by the store every few days, sometimes buying supplies he likely did not need, sometimes just stopping by to talk for a few minutes. He never pushed, never demanded more than she was willing to give, but made his presence a steady constant in her life. He told her about his years in Wyoming, painting pictures with words of the ranch and the hard work and the loneliness that had consumed him. He spoke honestly about his complicated relationship with Catherine, the guilt he felt for not recognizing her feelings, the anger at what she had stolen from them, and the pity he could not quite shake for a woman who had destroyed her own peace, chasing something she could never have. Teresa found herself telling him about her life in return, about the challenges of running a business as a woman, about her father's final days, about the way the town had changed and stayed the same. She told him about the marriage proposals she had received and rejected, about the well-meaning people who had tried to convince her to move on, about the stubborn loyalty to a memory that had shaped her entire adult life. They fell into a routine of sorts. Sunset walks twice a week, brief conversations at the store, occasional attendance together at town events. People watched them with endless curiosity, speculation running rampant about whether the tragic lovers would find their way back to each other. Teresa tried not to let the gossip bother her, tried to focus on what she was feeling rather than what others thought she should feel. And what she felt was a confusing tangle of attraction and wariness, hope and fear, old love and new possibility. 2 months after Wyatt's return, he invited her to dinner at the small restaurant that had opened near the mining office. It was their first real planned outing, something that felt more like a declaration of intent than their casual sunset walks. Teresa dressed carefully, choosing her best dress, a deep blue that her father had always said brought out her eyes. Mrs. Patterson fussed over her hair, pinning it up in a soft style that made her look younger, more like the girl she had been. "You are falling for him again," the older woman said, not making it a question. "I never stopped," Teresa admitted. "I just buried it, and now it is all coming back up and I do not know whether to be grateful or terrified." "Be both," Mrs. Patterson advised. "Love is not simple, child. It is messy and complicated and scary, but it is also the best thing we get in this hard life." Wyatt was waiting outside the restaurant, looking nervous and hopeful in a clean shirt and string tie. He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Teresa took it. The meal was surprisingly pleasant. They talked and laughed, finding the easy rhythm they had shared 8 years before but tempered now with maturity and understanding. Wyatt told stories about the horses he worked with, about the quirks and personalities of the animals that never failed to surprise him. Teresa shared observations about her customers, the small dramas and joys that played out in the general store. As the evening wore on, Teresa felt herself relaxing in a way she had not in years. This was right. Being with him felt right, and the realization was both thrilling and deeply unsettling. When Wyatt walked her home, they stood outside the store under a sky full of stars. He took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that was both tentative and intimate. "Thank you for tonight," he said. "For giving me this chance." "Thank you for coming back," Teresa replied. For not giving up, for crossing the distance, for still caring after all this time. Teresa, Wyatt said, and his voice dropped lower, more intense. I need you to know something. I am not going anywhere. Whether this works out between us or not, I am staying in Skidoo. I have already talked to the owner of the livery about buying in as a partner. This is not about pressuring you or making you feel obligated. This is about me choosing to build a life here in this place, because this is where you are. The declaration should have felt suffocating, but instead it felt like freedom. He was not making his entire existence contingent on her decision. He was choosing to be near her while giving her the space to choose him back. That is good, Teresa said softly, because I think I need you to stay. I think I need time to trust this, to trust us, and I could not do that if I thought you might disappear again. Never, Wyatt promised. I am here, solid and real, for as long as you will have me around. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth flooding through her entire body. Then he bid her good night and walked away, leaving her standing in the starlight, feeling like maybe, just maybe, she could let herself hope again. The seasons turned, summer giving way to autumn and then winter. Wyatt became a fixture in Teresa's life, steady and reliable and impossibly patient. They attended the church social together at Christmas, and tongues wagged when he danced with her 3 times, which was practically a declaration in a town like Skidoo. Teresa felt herself thawing, the ice around her heart melting under the steady warmth of Wyatt's presence. She caught herself thinking about him at odd moments, smiling at memories of things he had said, looking forward to their next meeting with an eagerness that felt both familiar and new. In January, on what would have been her 30th birthday, Wyatt gave her a gift. It was a small leather-bound journal, blank pages waiting to be filled. I know you wrote before, he said. Letters to me, pouring your heart onto paper. I thought maybe you might want to start writing again, but this time for yourself. A record of your thoughts, your days, your life. Something no one can steal or hide from you. Teresa ran her fingers over the smooth leather, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. Thank you. This is perfect. That night, she made her first entry, writing about the strange journey that had brought her to this moment, about the man who had come back from the dead, and the feelings she was slowly allowing herself to acknowledge. She wrote about fear and hope existing side by side, about the courage it took to love again after losing so much. Writing felt like coming home to a part of herself she had set aside, and she found herself filling pages with increasing frequency, documenting the small moments that made up her days. The journal became a confidant, a way of processing the tumultuous emotions that Wyatt's return had stirred up. Spring came early to the desert in 1892, bringing wildflowers that turned the foothills into a carpet of color. Wyatt suggested a picnic, and Teresa agreed, packing a basket while Mrs. Patterson gave her knowing looks. They rode out to a spot near a natural spring, where cottonwood trees provided shade, and the sound of water created a peaceful backdrop. Teresa had not been on a horse in years, but Wyatt had brought a gentle mare from the livery, and she found herself remembering the pleasure of riding. They spread a blanket under the trees, and ate the food Teresa had prepared, simple fare, but made special by the setting and the company. After they ate, they lay back on the blanket, watching clouds drift across the brilliant blue sky. "Can I ask you something?" Teresa said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Anything," Wyatt replied. "Why did you never marry?" In all those years, surely there were women who would have been interested. Catherine was not the only one, I imagine. Wyatt was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. There were a few who made their interest known, and I tried once to court a woman in Laramie. A schoolteacher, very kind and sensible. I thought maybe I could build a life with her, that I owed it to myself to try to move forward. Teresa felt an unexpected pang of jealousy at the mention of another woman which she tried to suppress. What happened? I could not do it, Wyatt said simply. Every time I looked at her, I saw you. Every conversation we had, I wished I was talking to you instead. It was not fair to her, trying to love her with a heart that belonged to someone else. So I ended it before it went too far, and I apologized for wasting her time. She married a banker the next year and seemed genuinely happy, which I was glad for. He turned his head to look at Teresa. I know 8 years is a long time to hold onto a memory, to cling to someone who might not have even been waiting. People told me I was foolish, that I should let go and live my life. But I could not, Teresa. Loving you was not something I chose, it was just a fact of my existence, like breathing or bleeding. Even when I thought you had moved on, I could not stop. Teresa felt tears prick her eyes. I felt the same way. After I thought you died, I tried so hard to let go, to move forward, but it was like part of me had died too, and I was just going through the motions of living. People said I was wasting my youth on a ghost, and maybe they were right, but I could not help it. Wyatt reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together. We are both here now, both alive, both being given a second chance that most people never get. What do you want to do with it? Teresa looked at their joined hands, at the physical proof of connection, and felt something shift inside her. The fear was still there, the wariness, the scars from old wounds, but beneath it all was the truth she had been dancing around for months. I want to try, she said. Really try, not just going through the motions of courtship, but actually letting you all the way back in. I am tired of being scared, tired of protecting myself at the cost of living. I want to see if we can build something real and lasting. Wyatt sat up, pulling her with him, his hands cupping her face with a gentleness that made her ache. Are you sure? Because, Teresa, if you let me in, I am not going anywhere. I will love you for the rest of my life through whatever comes, but I need to know you are ready for that. I am not sure of anything, Teresa admitted. Except that I love you. I never stopped loving you, and I am done pretending I can live without you. Wyatt kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of 8 years of longing. Teresa melted into him, letting herself feel everything she had been holding back. It was like the first kiss behind the stamp mill, but deeper, richer, weighted with time and loss and the precious gift of being found again. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Wyatt rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. Not someday, not eventually, but soon. I have wasted 8 years, and I do not want to waste another day not being your husband. Teresa laughed, a sound of pure joy that startled birds from the trees. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. They kissed again and again, making up for lost time under the spring sky. When they finally packed up the picnic and rode back to town, everything looked different to Teresa, brighter and more alive, full of possibility. Mrs. Patterson took one look at Teresa's face when she returned and started crying happy tears. Finally, she said, pulling Teresa into a hug. Finally, child, you get your happy ending. The engagement was announced the next Sunday at church, and if anyone had opinions about the speed of it, they kept them to themselves in the face of Teresa's obvious happiness. She moved through the following weeks in a daze of joy and activity, planning a wedding while also running the store and spending every possible moment with Wyatt. They decided on a simple ceremony in late May, when the desert was at its most beautiful, and the heat had not yet become oppressive. Teresa made her own dress, cream-colored linen with lace at the collar, practical but pretty. Wyatt bought a new suit from the tailor and looked so handsome in it that Teresa could barely breathe when she saw him. The night before the wedding, they sat together on the porch of the store, watching the stars emerge one by one. Wyatt had moved into a small house on the edge of town, the one that came with his partnership in the livery, and Teresa would move there after the ceremony. Mrs. Patterson had agreed to stay on and manage the living quarters above the store, which would be converted into a proper apartment. "Are you nervous?" Teresa asked, leaning against Wyatt's shoulder. "Terrified," he admitted. "Not about marrying you, but about deserving you. About being the husband you need, about making up for all the time we lost." "You cannot make up for it," Teresa said gently. "None of us can change the past, but we can build a future, and that is what matters now." "You are right," Wyatt said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Tomorrow, we start our life together, and every day after that will be a gift." The wedding was lovely, held in the small church with most of the town in attendance. Teresa walked down the aisle on Mrs. Patterson's arm, and when she reached Wyatt and saw the love and wonder in his eyes, she knew she was making the right choice. They exchanged vows, simple promises to love and honor and cherish each other through whatever came. When the preacher pronounced them married and told Wyatt he could kiss his bride, the kiss was chaste and sweet, a public declaration of private devotion. The reception was held at the church hall, with food brought by half the town and dancing that lasted into the evening. Teresa danced with her new husband over and over, losing herself in the joy of finally being able to claim him as hers. That night, in the house that would be their home, Wyatt carried Teresa over the threshold with gentle ceremony. They made love with tenderness and passion, discovering each other anew, no longer the young people they had been, but something deeper and more lasting. Afterward, lying tangled together in the darkness, Teresa traced patterns on Wyatt's chest and felt a contentment she had not known was possible. "I have something for you," Wyatt said, reaching for the drawer of the bedside table. He pulled out a bundle of papers, tied with new ribbon. Teresa recognized them immediately, her letters, the ones he had found in Catherine's attic. "I thought you read these already," she said, confused. "I did," Wyatt confirmed. "But they are yours, your words, your heart from 8 years ago. I thought you might want them back, to keep or to burn or to do whatever you need to do with them." Teresa took the bundle, feeling the weight of her younger self's emotions. "Will you read them with me?" she asked. "Not tonight, but sometime. I want to share them with you properly, to talk about what was lost and what we found again." "I would like that," Wyatt said, pulling her closer. "We can read one a week, make it a ritual, a way of honoring what we went through to get here." And that is what they did. Every Sunday evening, after church and dinner, they would sit together and read one of Teresa's letters. They would talk about what she had been feeling when she wrote it, what Wyatt had been going through at the same time, the parallel lives they had been living in lonely separation. Some letters made them cry. Others made them laugh at the innocence and hope of their younger selves. All of them brought them closer, creating a bridge between past and present, grief and joy, loss and recovery. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Teresa continued running the store, with Wyatt helping during the busy times and working at the livery the rest. They became a team, supporting each other's endeavors, building a life brick by brick. In October, just after their first anniversary, Teresa realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with equal parts joy and terror. Memories of writing to Wyatt about imagined children with his eyes suddenly becoming reality. She told him that evening, nervously waiting for his reaction. Wyatt's face went through several emotions in rapid succession before settling on absolute delight. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing and crying at the same time. "We are going to have a baby," he kept repeating, as if saying it would make it more real. "Teresa, we are going to be parents." The pregnancy was not easy. Teresa suffered from sickness that lasted well beyond the first few months, and the desert heat of summer made her miserable. But Wyatt was attentive and caring, taking over more of the store duties, bringing her cool water and fanning her when the heat became unbearable. In late May of 1893, just a few days after their second wedding anniversary, Teresa gave birth to a son. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Wyatt feared he would lose her, flashbacks to all the times death had tried to separate them. But Teresa was strong, stronger than anyone gave her credit for, and she fought through the pain to bring their child into the world. When the baby's cry finally rang out, Wyatt wept with relief and gratitude. They named him Samuel, after Teresa's father, with the middle name Grant. He was a healthy, lusty infant with his mother's dark hair and his father's gray eyes. Teresa held him and felt her heart expand to accommodate this new, overwhelming love. The first year of Samuel's life was a blur of sleepless nights and endless wonder. Wyatt proved to be a devoted father, getting up for middle-of-the-night feedings, changing diapers without complaint, and staring at his son with an expression of absolute awe that never quite faded. Teresa watched her husband with their child and fell in love with him all over again. This was what she had dreamed about in those letters, this family, this life, and having it finally felt like a dream made real. When Samuel was 6 months old, a letter arrived bearing a Wyoming postmark. Teresa's hands shook as she opened it, old fears rising up, but the contents were not what she expected. Catherine was dying. Cancer, the doctor said, with only a few months left. Her daughter had written to inform Wyatt, saying that Catherine wanted to speak with him one last time, to make her peace before the end. Wyatt read the letter with a complicated expression, anger and pity and old grief warring on his face. "I do not know what to do," he admitted to Teresa. "Part of me wants to ignore this, to let her face death without the absolution she is seeking. What she did was unforgivable." "But," Teresa prompted, knowing there was more, "but she is dying, and she is the mother of my brother's children, who I cared about even if I could not stay. And maybe I need to hear what she has to say, to close that chapter completely." Teresa understood, even though the thought of Wyatt returning to Wyoming, to the woman who had stolen years from them, made her stomach clench with anxiety. "Then go," she said. "Take the train, speak with her, and come home. I will be here, Samuel will be here, your life is here now." Wyatt pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Come with me," he said. "I do not want to be separated from you, not even for the weeks it would take to travel there and back. Bring Samuel, make it a family trip. I can show you the ranch, introduce you to my nieces and nephew, and we can face this together." Teresa considered this, the idea of traveling so far with an infant daunting but also appealing. "Are you sure?" "I am sure that I do not want to be apart from you," Wyatt said firmly. "We have had enough separation to last a lifetime. From now on, we face things together." So they made arrangements, leaving the store in Mrs. Patterson's capable hands and Jacob's help, and took the train to Wyoming in August of 1893. The journey was long and exhausting with a fussy infant, but also filled with moments of unexpected beauty as they crossed landscapes Teresa had only read about. The ranch was smaller than Teresa had imagined, a modest spread in the shadow of mountains that made the Panamints seem like foothills. Catherine's daughter, a woman in her early 20s named Sarah, greeted them with cautious warmth. "Mama is in her room," Sarah said after the introductions were made. "She has good days and bad days. Today is middling. She was very insistent about seeing you, Uncle Wyatt." Wyatt nodded, his jaw tight with tension. "Will you stay with me?" he asked Teresa quietly. "If you want me there, yes," she replied, shifting Samuel in her arms. They found Catherine in a bedroom that smelled of sickness and dying flowers. She was a shadow of what she must have been, wasted by disease, her skin sallow and her eyes sunken. But those eyes lit up when she saw Wyatt, a spark of the obsession that had caused so much damage. Then she saw Teresa and the baby, and something in her face crumpled. "You brought them," she whispered. "This is my wife, Teresa, and our son, Samuel," Wyatt said, his voice carefully neutral. "You wanted to speak with me. I am listening." Catherine's gaze lingered on Teresa, taking in her youth and the obvious love in her eyes when she looked at Wyatt. "You are even more beautiful than I imagined from your letters," she said, and the words were laced with bitter regret. "You read them," Teresa said, and it was not a question. "Every one," Catherine admitted. "I read your letters to him and his letters to you before I destroyed them. I tortured myself with your words, with the evidence of a love I could never inspire in anyone, let alone him. I hated you for having so easily what I wanted so desperately." "You had no right," Teresa said, her voice shaking with anger. "You had no right to make that choice for us, to steal years we can never get back." "I know," Catherine said, tears sliding down her wasted cheeks. "I know, and I am sorry. It is worthless now, my apology, but I am sorry. I was selfish and cruel, and I justified it by telling myself that I deserved happiness too, that it was not fair that you got him when I had lost my husband. But it was never about fairness. It was about wanting something I could not have and destroying others in my pursuit of it." Wyatt stood rigid, his hand finding Teresa's and gripping tight. "I do not forgive you," he said flatly. "I cannot. What you did caused pain I cannot even fully articulate. But I am here because you are dying, and because my brother loved you, and because holding on to this anger would only poison me." "That is more than I deserve," Catherine whispered. "Will you do something for me? Will you let Sarah and the children know you that Samuel have cousins? Do not let my sins rob them of family." Wyatt looked at Teresa, a question in his eyes. She nodded slowly. The children were innocent in all this, and family was precious. "We will write," Wyatt said, "and if they ever want to visit us in California, they will be welcome." Catherine closed her eyes, something like peace settling over her ravaged features. "Thank you, and Teresa, if you are willing to hear it, I am truly sorry. You wrote about love with such purity, such devotion. Reading your words, I understood that what I felt for Wyatt was not love at all. It was obsession and desperation. I hope you can build the life together that you both deserve." Teresa felt her anger soften, just slightly, in the face of such complete defeat. "I hope you find peace," she said, and meant it. They left Catherine to rest and spent the next few days at the ranch, getting to know Sarah and her siblings. The young people were curious about their uncle's life, about California and the store and the baby who charmed them all with his gummy smiles. When news came that Catherine had passed quietly in her sleep, Wyatt helped arrange the funeral, standing stoically through the service. They stayed for the burial, watching as she was laid to rest next to Wyatt's brother, and then they prepared to return home. On the train heading back to California, with Samuel sleeping peacefully in a makeshift cradle, Teresa and Wyatt talked long into the night. "You feel any differently?" Teresa asked. "Now that she is gone, now that you have heard her apology?" "I do not know," Wyatt admitted. "Part of me is just sad for all of it, the waste and the pain and the years lost. But another part of me feels lighter, like a weight I did not know I was carrying has been lifted." "She was right about one thing," Teresa said. "What she felt for you was not love. Love does not destroy. It builds up, supports, and makes room for the other person's happiness, even if that happiness does not include you." "Is that what you did?" Wyatt asked. "When you thought I was dead, when you had no hope of being with me, did you make room for my happiness?" "I tried to," Teresa said. "I grieved, But I never wished that you had lived differently or made different choices. I just wished we had been given more time." Wyatt kissed her then, soft and lingering. "We have time now. We have the rest of our lives." They returned to Skidoo in early September, welcomed back by Mrs. Patterson and the curious townspeople who wanted to hear about their journey. Life resumed its comfortable patterns, made richer by the experience of having faced the past and emerged stronger. Samuel grew into a bright, energetic toddler who delighted in helping his mother in the store and following his father around the livery. In 1895, Teresa gave birth to a daughter whom they named Grace Patricia, after no one in particular but simply because they liked the sound of it. She was a calm baby, content to observe the world with serious gray eyes. The years passed in a rhythm of work and family, small joys and occasional challenges. The store prospered, and Wyatt's livery business grew as Skidoo experienced another mining boom. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable and, more importantly, happy. In 1898, when Samuel was 5 and Grace was 3, Teresa discovered she was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the previous two, and in early 1899, she gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Daniel and Rose. Their small house became gloriously chaotic, filled with the noise and mess of 4 young children. Wyatt expanded the house, adding rooms to accommodate their growing family, while Teresa hired additional help for the store so she could spend more time at home. The letters, those precious artifacts from their separation, had all been read and discussed, the ritual of Sunday evenings providing healing and closure. Teresa kept them in a special box, along with the journal Wyatt had given her, which she still wrote in regularly. Sometimes, when the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Teresa would take out one of her old letters and read it, marveling at the girl she had been and the journey that had brought her to this moment. The pain had faded, leaving only the sweetness of knowing that their love had survived everything thrown at it. In 1901, they received a letter from Sarah in Wyoming, announcing that she was getting married and hoping Uncle Wyatt and his family might be able to attend the wedding. It was too far to travel with 4 young children, but they sent a generous gift and a letter full of warm wishes. Sarah wrote back with thanks and news of her siblings, and a correspondence began that would last years, creating a bridge across the distance. The children loved receiving letters from their Wyoming cousins, hearing about ranch life so different from their own desert existence. Life was good, better than Teresa had ever dared to dream during those dark years when she thought Wyatt was lost to her forever. She watched him with their children, patient and loving and endlessly devoted, and felt gratitude so profound it sometimes brought her to tears. In 1904, Samuel started school, and Teresa felt the first pangs of her babies growing up. But there was joy in watching them learn and develop their own personalities. Samuel was thoughtful and serious. Grace was creative and dreamy. Daniel was adventurous and bold, while Rose was stubborn and fiercely independent. The store became something of a family enterprise as the children grew old enough to help. Samuel showed an aptitude for numbers and began helping with inventory and accounts. Grace loved arranging displays and had an eye for what would sell. Even the twins, still young, would sweep floors and dust shelves under Mrs. Patterson's watchful supervision. Wyatt's livery business continued to thrive, and he took on an apprentice, a young man from Los Angeles who wanted to learn the trade. Watching Wyatt teach someone else, Teresa was reminded of his patience and his essential kindness, the qualities that had made her fall in love with him in the first place. In 1906, on their 14th wedding anniversary, Wyatt surprised Teresa with a gift. It was a small painting, commissioned from a traveling artist of the canyon edge where they used to watch sunsets. The colors were vivid and true, capturing the stark beauty of the desert landscape. "So you never forget where we found our way back to each other," Wyatt said as he presented it. Teresa hung it in a place of honor in their home, where she could see it every day, a reminder of second chances and stubborn love. The children grew, and the years continued their steady march. Samuel showed interest in taking over the store eventually, which pleased Teresa immensely. Grace discovered a talent for singing and performed at church socials to much acclaim. Daniel followed his father into the livery business, showing a natural way with horses. Rose announced at age 10 that she was going to be a doctor, and nothing anyone said could dissuade her from this ambition. In 1910, Teresa turned 48 and Wyatt turned 50. They celebrated quietly, marveling at the life they had built, the family they had created, the love that had endured. "You ever regret it?" Teresa asked one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in familiar colors. "The years we lost, the time we can never get back." Wyatt considered the question, then shook his head. "I regret that we suffered. I regret the pain and the loneliness and the misunderstanding. But I do not regret the journey that brought us here. Everything we went through made us who we are, made us appreciate what we have. If we had married at 21 and 23, had an easy path, would we value it as much?" "I do not know." "That is very philosophical of you," Teresa said with a smile. "I've had a lot of time to think about it," Wyatt replied, taking her hand. "And what I have concluded is that we got our happy ending, even if it took longer and was harder than it should have been. We have each other, we have our children, we have a good life. That is more than many people ever get." "You are right," Teresa said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "We are blessed, and I am grateful for every day." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon. Two people who had found their way through darkness to light, through separation to togetherness, through heartbreak to healing. In 1912, Samuel married a sweet girl from a neighboring town, and Teresa became a mother-in-law. The wedding was lovely, held at the same church where she and Wyatt had married 20 years before, and watching her son exchange vows, Teresa felt the circle of life completing itself. Grace followed suit in 1914, marrying a merchant's son who supported her musical ambitions and encouraged her to perform. Daniel remained unmarried but content, building the livery business alongside his father and showing no signs of settling down. And Rose, true to her word, left for San Francisco in 1915 to attend medical school, one of the few women accepted into the program. She wrote home regularly, filling her letters with details of her studies and her determination to become a doctor who would serve communities like Skidoo, where medical care was scarce. As grandchildren arrived, Teresa and Wyatt embraced their new roles with enthusiasm. They spoiled the babies shamelessly, delighting in the simple joys of rocking cribs and telling stories and passing down family traditions. In 1917, the world went to war, and the distant conflict touched even their small desert town. Daniel enlisted despite his parents' fears, determined to serve his country. The year he was gone was one of the hardest of Teresa's life, memories of loss and separation rising up to haunt her. But Daniel returned in 1919, changed by what he had seen but fundamentally still himself. He came home to Skidoo, to the livery and his family, and slowly readjusted to peace. Life continued its steady progression. Samuel took over management of the store as Teresa gradually retired, spending more time with grandchildren and the garden she had cultivated behind the house. Wyatt similarly stepped back from day-to-day operations at the livery, letting Daniel run things while he offered advice and occasional help. They grew old together, their hair turning white, their bodies slowing down, but their love remaining constant. Every Sunday, they still took walks when their health permitted, returning to the canyon edge to watch the sun set over the desert they called home. In 1925, they celebrated their 33rd wedding anniversary surrounded by children and grandchildren, a house full of love and laughter and life. Looking around at the family they had created, Teresa felt a sense of completion, of purpose fulfilled. That night, in the quiet of their bedroom, Wyatt held her close and whispered, "Thank you for waiting for me. Thank you for writing those letters, for pouring your heart onto pages even when you thought I would never read them. Thank you for giving me a second chance when I found them and came running." "Thank you for coming back," Teresa replied, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for not giving up, for crossing the distance, for loving me through everything." They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had for 33 years, two souls who had found their way back to each other against impossible odds. Rose graduated from medical school in 1926 and returned to California, setting up a practice in Skidoo just as she had always planned. She became a beloved figure in the community, the doctor who would ride out to remote mining camps and homesteads, who never turned away a patient regardless of their ability to pay. She remained unmarried, dedicating herself to her work, and Teresa respected her daughter's choice even while secretly hoping she might find the kind of love her parents had shared. In 1928, Teresa turned 66 and Wyatt turned 68. They were slowing down considerably, their bodies betraying them in small ways, but their minds remained sharp and their love as strong as ever. One evening in late autumn, sitting on their porch watching yet another sunset, Wyatt turned to Teresa with a serious expression. "I need you to promise me something," he said. "Anything," Teresa replied, worried by his tone. "When I am gone, and I know that day is coming sooner rather than later, I need you to keep living. Keep finding joy, keep loving our family, keep watching these sunsets. Do not waste years grieving the way you did before. I will be gone, but I will have had a full life, a happy life because of you. Promise me you will remember that." Teresa's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "Only if you promise me the same. If I go first, you keep living too. We have earned our happiness, both of us, and neither of us should cut it short out of grief." "Deal," Wyatt said, and they shook hands solemnly before dissolving into laughter at the formality of it. But the conversation proved prescient. In the spring of 1929, Wyatt's health began to fail. His heart, the doctor said, weakened by years of hard work and the natural progression of age. He took to his bed, surrounded by family, and faced the end with the same quiet courage he had shown throughout his life. Teresa rarely left his side, holding his hand and telling him stories of their life together, reminding him of all the good they had created. The children and grandchildren came to say their goodbyes, and the small house was filled with love even as it prepared for loss. On a warm evening in May, with Teresa beside him and the family gathered around, Wyatt took his final breath. He went peacefully, slipping away like the sun slipping below the horizon, and Teresa felt a piece of her heart go with him. The grief was profound, a deep ache that reminded her of that first loss when she thought he had died years before. But this time was different. This time, she had decades of memories to sustain her, proof of a life well lived and a love fully realized. This time, she was surrounded by the family they had created together, evidence of their enduring legacy. She mourned him, deeply and truly, but she also kept her promise. She continued living, finding joy in her grandchildren, in the store that Samuel ran, in the visits from Grace and her family, in Daniel's steady presence, in Rose's dedication to her patients. She kept writing in the journal Wyatt had given her, now one of many volumes that documented their life together. She wrote about missing him, about the empty space beside her in bed, about how the sunsets seemed less vibrant without him there to share them. But she also wrote about gratitude. Gratitude for the years they had been given, for the second chance that had allowed them to build a life together, for the love that had survived separation and time, and every obstacle thrown in its way. In 1932, Grace gave birth to her fifth grandchild, a boy they named Wyatt in honor of his grandfather. Teresa held the baby and felt the circle completing once more, her husband's name living on in this new generation. Rose, at 33, surprised everyone by falling in love with a fellow doctor who came to Skidoo to help with a tuberculosis outbreak. They married in a simple ceremony, and Teresa rejoiced in seeing her independent daughter finally find a partner who appreciated her strength and ambition. Daniel married that same year, a late marriage but a happy one, to a widow with 2 children of her own. The expanded family brought new life to the old house, and Teresa watched with satisfaction as her children built their own versions of happiness. She continued her quiet life, helping in the store when she felt up to it, spending time with grandchildren, taking slow walks to the canyon edge where she and Wyatt had watched so many sunsets together. She would stand there, feeling the wind on her face, and talk to him in her mind, updating him on family news and telling him how much she still loved him. In 1935, Teresa turned 73. She was still in relatively good health, her mind sharp even if her body had slowed considerably. She had outlived most of her generation in Skidoo, becoming something of a town matriarch, the woman who had run the store for decades, who had raised successful children, who had loved and been loved in a way that inspired others. Young couples would come to her sometimes, asking for advice about marriage and love. She would smile and tell them the same thing, that love was work, that it required patience and forgiveness and determination, but that it was worth every effort. She would tell them about writing letters to a man who never received them, about refusing to give up hope even in the face of loss, about second chances and the courage to take them. And she would tell them about Wyatt, about the man who had found those letters years later and had come running back to her, crossing distance and time to claim the love they both deserved. In the spring of 1937, Teresa began to feel her own strength fading. She was not afraid of death, had made her peace with it long ago. She had lived a full life, had loved and been loved, had created a family that would carry on long after she was gone. On a warm evening in late May, the anniversary of Wyatt's death 8 years prior, Teresa asked Samuel to help her out to the porch. She sat in her rocking chair, wrapped in blankets despite the warmth, and watched the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. Her children and grandchildren gathered around, sensing without being told that this was important, that this moment mattered. Teresa looked at each of them in turn, these people who existed because she and Wyatt had refused to let go of love, and smiled. "I want you all to know something," she said, her voice thin but clear. "Your grandfather and I, we were given a gift, a second chance that most people never get. We were separated by cruelty and misunderstanding. We lost years we can never get back, but we found our way to each other again. And from that reunion, from that stubborn refusal to let go of love, came all of you." She paused, catching her breath, and Rose, ever the doctor, checked her pulse with concerned eyes. But Teresa waved her away gently. "Love is the only thing that matters in the end," Teresa continued. "Not money or success or status, but the connections we forge with other people, the family we build, the love we give and receive. Your grandfather and I learned that the hard way, but we learned it completely. and I hope you all remember it, carry it forward, teach it to your children. The sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple. Teresa watched it, feeling Wyatt's presence as clearly as if he were sitting beside her. "He is here," she said softly. "I can feel him waiting for me, and I am ready to go to him." Samuel knelt beside her chair, taking her hand. "We love you, Mama, so much." "I love you too," Teresa said, squeezing his hand with what strength she had left. "All of you, more than I could ever express." The sun slipped below the horizon, and Teresa took one final breath, letting it out slowly as her spirit slipped away to join the man who had been her other half. They buried her next to Wyatt in the Skidoo cemetery, under a shared headstone that read, "Teresa and Wyatt Schneider. Separated by distance, united by love, together for eternity." The store continued under Samuel's management, then eventually passed to his daughter. The livery business thrived under Daniel's guidance, becoming one of the most successful in the region. Grace's children inherited her musical talent, several of them becoming professional musicians. And Rose's medical practice served the community for decades, a living testament to determination and compassion. But perhaps the most important legacy Teresa and Wyatt left behind were the letters. Before she died, Teresa had given the box of letters to Rose, the daughter most like her in temperament and determination. "These are important," she had said. "They tell the story of what your father and I went through, of how we found our way back to each other. Keep them safe, share them with your children and grandchildren. Let them understand that true love is worth fighting for, worth waiting for, worth crossing any distance to claim." Rose kept that promise. The letters were carefully preserved, passed down through generations as a family treasure. They were read at weddings, shared with young people facing their own relationship struggles, held up as proof that love could survive anything if it was strong enough and true enough. And so the story lived on, long after Teresa and Wyatt were gone. The story of a young woman who wrote letters to a cowboy who never received them, pouring her heart onto pages that disappeared into the void. The story of a man who found those letters years later and came running back to the woman who had written them, determined to reclaim the love that had been stolen from them. It was a story of loss and redemption, of patience and persistence, of second chances and stubborn devotion. It was a story that proved love could transcend time and distance, and every obstacle placed in its path. And it was a story that, in the end, had the happiest ending possible. Two people who loved each other completely, who built a life together despite everything working against them, who created a family that would carry their legacy forward for generations to come. In the small desert town of Skidoo, California, where the Panamint Mountains cast long shadows and the sunsets painted the sky in impossible colors, the love story of Teresa Coleman and Wyatt Schneider became legend. It was told and retold, embellished and cherished, a reminder that even in the harsh landscape of the Wild West, even in times when communication was slow and separation was cruel, love could find a way. Their story was not easy, but it was real. It was not perfect, but it was true. And in the end, that was what mattered most.